Hi, you guys. I'm just setting up and making sure that sound is a-okay. So give me just a moment here before I begin today. Um, let's see. I do believe I'm live. Look it, I can't find my I cannot find my thing. Hold on a sec. Oh my gosh, this is so silly. Um, isn't it crazy, you guys? I cannot find. I'm on Twitch and I cannot find my main page that shows I'm live. And it's driving me absolutely crazy. So, consequently, I don't know if I'm talking or not. And I cannot handle that. So, it says I'm live. It says there are some viewers here. But I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, so those of you who are here, can you let me know if you can hear me? Do you hear me? Can you hear me? Hmm? Do you hear me? Do you hear me? I think you can hear me. Let's see. Live with Palia, it says. I don't want to start chat. I don't want to go on unless I know you can hear me. So I'm going to run into the other room real quick. I'll be right back. Do you hear me? Okay, I guess you guys can hear me because I ran into my studio and did my little computer, and I yelled, "Do you hear me?" And I heard it come over as I was running back here. So hi, you guys. Here we are, and it's Thursday, and I decided to come into Palia. And look at, I've got all my little babies. These are my little collection. I got to show you this. This, of course, is Thursday, and you know what it is. It's my Fairy with Teeth, my author narration, and I like to do it in different settings. Once a month I show me, and then I do it sometimes from Elder Scrolls Online and from Palia. And this week I decided to do it from Palia. Look at all these crazy frogs and crabs. They've been knocked out and they are all holding Some of them are holding knives. How crazy is that? They're having a war. Can you imagine living in a world where crabs and frogs, first of all, have kings, and then they go crazy with each other and have a war. Here's my giant plushies. Aren't they cute? Look at my plushies. Those are all the froggies. And then of course here's some little special ones, little fishy thingies. Okay, I'm going to show you this. I know those of you who play Palia, if you happen to peek in, are aware of it, but check that out. That's an easy way to get on top of the roof. Anyways. Okay. Enough about that. I'm going to come and sit here in this peaceful little gazebo that I have set up here. And from here is where, oh, get off the table, little puppy. A little puppy likes to get places where it's not supposed to be. All right. Hey, Kisma here, Flower Kisma here, aka Kisma K, Stepanik Riedling. Yes, I am the author of the Faery-Chronicles novel series, and I have been reading to you Fairy with Teeth, Book 1 of the Faery-Chronicles. And we're already at page 280, and that's where we're going to resume. So grab something to drink, kick back, put on something else to watch if you want, and turn for a visual, and turn down that volume. Keep mine up, of course. And imagine that you're sitting right here in this sweet little gazebo with me, listening to me as I read to you. So relax, enjoy. Remember, they're doing this battle at Locker, okay, off and on, and now it's happening. So page 280. Bring her to me. There's something more I want, Sean McDowell growled into the cave, so be good about it, will ya, and pull her and that druid back. He threw a freshly killed goat carcass into the cave. It made a thud as it hit the ground. The sorcerer bent over and peered into the darkness. Movement came from somewhere inside, something scraping against rock and whooshing inside the cave. A whooshing, sucking sound, scraping. This caused him to nod and smile in satisfaction. The dark force had accepted his offering. He straightened and closed his eyes, opening his mind in communication. No, not here, he said as if in answer to a spoken question. The Grange, he hissed. Yes, that will be best. He turned abruptly and made his way to the top of Knockadun. He found the spot he was looking for and stomped on the ground 3 times. Bending over, he tore at the grass until the soil was exposed. He went to his knees, fumbling in his shirt pocket for a penknife. Finding it, he pulled it free, unlatched the blade, and slid it firmly across the palm of his hand. Blood seeped to the surface of the fresh wound, trickled down the sides of his hand, and dripped to the soil. A dark stain began to form on the earth. Unseelie court, awaken! Droy of darkness, awaken! He growled the words, his tone ancient sounding, and a voice of a monster. No remorse, no sympathy, no reflection of tenderness resonated through his timbre. It was the voice of callousness, the voice of hatred, of envy of the living. Elves of evil, awaken! Prepare for encounter. Go now to the Grange, stir the howlers in the stones. Time for feeding is at hand. He squeezed his hand together, flinching as the wound stung. He flung his head back and howled of a beast ripping from his throat, followed by hideous laughter. Faery-Chronicle entry 2.444.4. The wind whipped in cyclones across the loch. Darkness shadowed the already black waters, giving the illusion that something was moving under the surface. The dark droy roused from slumber, coming up from the depths of the loch, moving under the water toward the hill. Crippled and grotesque bodies staggered onto the land. The pungent scent of blood caused their nostrils to flare as they neared the cave. Their wrinkled mouths were slobbered with drool, which slid down pock-marked chins, glistening on corroded fangs. Red, beady eyes flashed from under heavy brows, eyes that searched the area. On land, these hideous beasts looked like heavy shadows moving slowly beneath the trees. They laboriously headed for the circle of stones. Their presence earthside caused a great commotion in the seas of the other world, rousing our hosts into anger. The sun inched lower on the horizon, its light suddenly blocked by a black cloud, a coffin over Loch Gur. Today the sky was not wide, but rather confining and ugly. Sean McDowell lipped his chapped lips. Soon he would taste the energy of the woman, very soon now. He took no notice of the shadowy figures that had risen from the water and moved slowly across the hill into the cover of the trees. Even the ooze and stench of legions and its horde of black flies did not faze the sorcerer as it stretched over the hill, casting a dark shroud across the surface of the undulating land. Soon she would be his. Nothing else mattered. "Bring her to me," he yelled to the black clouds and stretched out his hand, clutching the thin air as if she stood there, then drawing them back to his chest. The droy slipped into the palace beneath the grange, grabbing their tools of evil. On floor or tabletop, they pounded the objects, the rhythm echoing through the stones, rising above the earth one by one. Each stone flashed red, starting at the Crom Dubh pillar and moving counterclockwise around the grange. The howlers, the fairy with teeth, began to stir. Vivian rose from the chair she was sitting in and moved into the center of the dining area. "If I can have everyone's attention," she said, "we'll be heading back to our respective B&Bs for the night. Our stay in this area almost over. Tomorrow morning we depart at 9 and head south." "No more sights then?" asked Ken, feeling awkward about asking, but feeling an urgency come over him. Vivian met Ken's gaze. "No," she said. But what about the Grange?" he asked, eyes wide, feeling a panic coming on. "Yeah, the Grange!" exclaimed Steve, boiled into attention. "That's the only sight I've really been looking forward to seeing." Vivian looked from man to man, unknowingly sucked into a synapse of electricity flashing between the two. "No way," she thought as a silly smile curved her lips and her eyes glazed over. Kian took a bite of his hamburger and glanced up at Vivian. "Sure," she said, turning to Kian, their eyes meeting. Kian froze. Now what the hell is she doing, he wondered, and watched Vivian closely as she looked to Kian, then to Steve. "No problem," Vivian said, assuring the two men. "It's on the way back to your B&B, so we'll just stop there." You ready to go? She asked, glancing at Kian, but not waiting for an answer. Said, okay, everyone, let's go to the Grange. The chipper became a whirlwind of commotion as everyone scurried about, throwing trash away, picking up belongings, heading outside. Kian sat there dumbfounded, suspicion clouding his countenance. He looked down at the half-eaten burger in his hands before slamming it down on the tray. Yep, that's our first chapter for today. Yes, Toot. Hi, Maud. How are you? You are very welcome here. I hope you're enjoying my story. And do you play Palia? I'm just curious. I'm going to get up and move locations because I find that if I sit too long in one spot, it crashes on me. Oh, look at all these. That's not even all of them. I'm getting ready to build something right there. I think we'll come in here and we'll have a seat down here as I read the next. You loved it? Oh, yay. I love when you love it. That makes me so happy. All right. I'm going to continue on page 284 with the bright powers. Faery-Chronicle entry 2.444.5. The test has begun, Maka said quietly. She opened her eyes and turned to face the others gathered. Onya and Lu stood to her left. Mananan and Ekde stood to her right, with the Boken facing her in the center, while I lingered in the background. Well then, came Mananan's silvery voice, we shall see if she is capable of withstanding evil this incarnation. Aye, added Onya, her summer smile meek and tiny, a trembling sliver of a crescent. She will, she stressed vehemently, as if willing it to be so, and looked to Lu for reassurance. He stood, withdrawn, thoughts concealed. What think you? She asked him. Bright blue flared from his eyes as he focused them on her. He took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. The priest knows darkness, said Lu. He is drawn to it like the moon is drawn to earth. It is his inability to conquer the test I am more concerned with. His darkness is why I picked him, said Maka, drawing attention to herself. We all know that we choose to reincarnate through mortals whose potential it is great toward both good or evil. That is why they are so valuable to us. The mortal must awaken to their own inner force. Mananan and Ekte nodded. Aye, 'tis true, confirmed the sea god. If such a challenge did not exist, then what good to us be the mortal's position in life? The priestess agreed to serve goddess this life. Aye, asked Ekte, searching Lu's eyes for understanding. Which is what made her the perfect candidate for Banba, added Onya. Aye, 'tis true, said Lu. I understand how we undergo the process, he said indignantly. Man, we know what causes you pain, Mananan said to Lu, but you must give her up. Banba is not meant to be your wife. She never was. She never will be. I disagree, Lu stated vehemently. There's always a chance. He looked at each in defiance. Maka shook her head. Love is the greatest law. Of that we all agree, but selfish love is not what this is about. She stared Lu down. He finally nodded in agreement and stepped back, showing his acceptance. Good, said Maka. Now, Banba has awakened, while Makul has not. The chances of his doing so on his own are not great. However, his energy, whether fully awakened or utilized by the goddess, is all that matters to complete my assignment. But why Bonba? Asked Anya. Why not you? Asked Maeve, or Mauve, or Fawn, or half a dozen other she? Anya nodded. Because Bonba is the land of the creation, and Fotla is the growth of the creation, and together they can free Era from imprisonment. Thus the mind, body, soul of our beloved land will once again be united. Unity equals wholeness, and this wholeness will permeate the heart of the planet, for I, the heart of creation, will be rejoined with the other provinces at Ishnok. Anya swallowed and looked down. Silence permeated the palace. All gathered understood what Maka spoke. All understood that for the heart of creation to be remembered to her rightful place, Maka would cease to be. She would return to origin. Then, Maka said softly, Maeve and Elil will call the Ancient Ones to join in support. Then they will announce the next assignment. We looked at one another. Deep evolution was indeed at work. The master plan was moving forward. As faint as a breeze, I moved, stepping away from their audience, not so much turning my back on them, but to see if I might catch a more penetrating perspective into Vivian's mind, which seemed to have turned away from her own conscious willpower and was under the intoxicating influence of darkness. Deep within, I understood that this battle that was to unfold before me, which I was to watch and witness, held more importance to me than to any of the host summoned at this hour to observe the ageless struggle between immortals and our endless fascination with mortality. Outside, in the land of mortal women, the Celtic twilight edged the world in grey-blue, and in the far distance the Leinster Mountains ranged, a dark blue against the twilight. May it not even be that death shall unite us to all romance, and that some day we shall fight dragons amongst blue hills, or come to that whereof all romance is but foreshadowing, mingled with the images of man's misdeeds in greater days than these, as the old men thought in the earthly paradise when they were in good spirits. I whispered poetically, quoting my beloved Yeats. The bright powers are always beautiful and desirable, and the dim powers are now beautiful, now quaintly grotesque. But the dark powers express their unbalanced natures in shapes of ugliness and horror. I said to the phantoms of the land who stood in waiting in the royal mountain, Bonba is bright, Makul is dim. And with those words, I left my beloved hill, releasing my conscious mind into the realm of the dream time as I slipped between the bend and made my way to Loch Gur. Okay. That is chapter 2 for this day, this week's reading. Let's see, where shall I go now? Oh, I know. I think I'm going to go in here into my spa and enjoy. I've got me a mermaid harp now. I love it. But I'll sit here and wait for someone to come and manicure me toes. Oh dear, I can't sit down there. That's oh, I guess I never thought I couldn't sit there. Oh, now I'm speaking with an Irish lilt, and I'm not Irish at all. Okay, well, I am in the blood, but not, no, let's see. Let's see if I can sit on my mermaid's chair and pretend I'm playing the harp. No, I have my harp too close, and I'm not going to do anything with it. I know what I can do. Let's take a shower. Let's take a bath. Ready? Let me do my little emote, my little sit. Uh, oh no, I'm doing a romantic song. Okay, I think I can sit right here. Oh no, I didn't do the right thing. Oh gosh. I thought I sat with this. No, I guess not. Nope, doesn't want to work. Nothing's working for me today. All right, let's go out of here. I know where to go. We'll go sit at the very back. There we go. And look at the scenery. At the trees blowing. Okay. I'm going to continue now with the third chapter, and this one will probably take up the rest of our time together. It's a bit of a long chapter. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Okay, maybe I'll have 2 more to read. Page 288. The Gathering at the Grange. Faery-Chronicle entry 2.551. The sun was an orange ball on the horizon, one-eyed gold light of the western fire. The setting sun smouldered and cast his last look upon the Grange before his blackened head rolled powerless beneath the waves of midnight, and he retreated in a dignified accent to the phantom Isle of Brazil, the Isle of the living, of truth, of joy, of fair women, and of apples. Goal's light flared, spotting off the dark bent one, Crom Dove, who stood under the oak tree on the northern mound outside the stone circle. Crom wore a helmet with bull horns distended from the sides of it. In his hands rested Rannoch, the magic double-pronged ash staff. Beside him stood his fairy mistress, Ethne. Upon her head sat a crescent new moon crown, and in her hands were shafts of wheat. Crom looked up at Ethne and grunted. She gave him a smile before returning her gaze to Goal, whose voice shimmered across the distance to her. May the light be fair to me. May thy course be smooth to me. If good to me is thy beginning, 7 times better be thine end, thou fair moon of the seasons, thou great lamp of grace. The tenderness in Goal's voice touched the moon fairy, and she responded through her moonlight. She would draw things together to allow the priestess entrance into the domain of the she. She would not hesitate to assist. And from the north came the unearthly blast of a trumpet. 1,500 meters away, on a 46 degrees angle, on the midsummer sunrise arc, the red cellar cave on Knockfinnell began to glow with an iridescent light. The demigod Finn McCool and his white boys, the Fianna, streamed out from the red cellar cave and swiftly made their way down the hill. They tread the ancient Onach race course and came around the western shore of the loch, heading south toward the Grange. On the Clá na Lech, deep furrows caused by chariot wheels in distant days had etched the track deeply into the earth. Finn took the lead, riding upon the back of a black mare, the druidic horse given to him by Dill, the bardic priest. He raised a bronze horn-shaped trumpet to his lips and blew, long and hard. The waters of Loch Gur began to recede. Unad's great green foliage was revealed as the waters disappeared, and he was united with Eogabal, the strong trunk of the tree of trees, the Axis Mundi, a union which brought the worlds of the she and humanity together. The supernatural twin gods stood rooted in the loch bed. The heavenly realm was successfully merged with the plains. At the base of the trunk sat Druanthia, a withered hag, knitting a green bratuan And when the time came for the worlds to divide, she would throw her green cloth over the tree of trees, concealing it from sight, ending all enchantment. Druithia looked up from her project, rheumatic eyes flaring and focused on Nuckadun. Her thoughts radiated to our host. Won't the old sorcerer piss his pants when he realizes who all is gathering to witness his black magic? She clicked her teeth together, shook her head, and returned her attention to her knitting. Several grey stones tumbled to the ground off the Bactha Dermid Ishgrania, located 1,200 metres from the Grange between the south shore of Loch Gur and the Red Bog. A soft keening filled the air around the giant's grave as Onya's minions rose. Dim light pulsed just beneath the earth around the grave, illuminating the tomb's interior. The underworld opened. Dermot and Granny climbed out from their bed. The couple stood in an embrace under the shelter of an ash tree, smiling into each other's eyes. Their love was a shimmering rainbow around them. They heard the trumpets blast and jerked their heads toward the Grange. Although Finn no longer posed a threat to their well-being, his presence always made them shudder. My brightness, my beauty, cooed Dermot. Relax. His words soothed her, and she laid her head against his shoulder. The red light of gold reflected in the bus windows as it turned a curve in the road, heading towards the Grange. Dermot and Granny watched it pass on the road, not more than 10 feet away from where they stood. Soon now, said Granny, soon. Aye, responded Dermot, and perhaps they'll put a stop to the blood spilling. Granny's blue eyes filled with tears. She bit her bottom lip. On Nuckadun, Sean McDowell also heard the trumpet blast. He turned his head slowly and peered over his shoulder. The crown of Knockfinnell was ablaze with the fairy cavalcade. Finn and Fianna moved down the hillside. The sorcerer froze as he saw the hag sitting under the enchanted tree in the dry loch. His hands instinctively curled into fists, and he gritted his teeth. The hag raised her head, looking in his direction, her beady eyes red coals. I am the son of the king of the Norman fairies, he hissed, and my name is Gerald Tarla, the 2nd Earl of Desmond. The hag bent her head. He whipped around, focusing his attention on the Grange. It bothered him that the monster she had risen from fairyland, and he wondered who else stood in witness around the shore. Who was this witch that she should cause the She to open and emit the earthlight into the human world? He jumped as a second trumpet blast echoed across the loch. You are an evil one, said a silvery voice. A dark power, tinkled another. Unseelie, chimed yet another. The sloth, they rang in union. He raised a hand and swatted at the nature sprites as if they were a swarm of annoying gnats. Begone, he cried. The ancient ones gather at the Grange to witness this test, they chimed. Sean McDowell froze. Test! He pondered this, eyes squinting toward the far side of the dry loch, as if he could see the Grange hidden beneath the ash trees and conifers. Your dark power is concentrated in Leos, said the tinkling voices of the first sprite under the fairy name for the Grange. "Evil is your undoing," came the chiming curse of the second sprite. The old man sneered, coughed, and spat at the ground before checking the Fianna's position. Much to his dismay, they had disappeared from sight. An electrical surge crackled through the air. The sorcerer turned back. The sprites hung, suspended in the air around him. 4 tiny faces focused on the stone circle. "She has arrived," they chimed, darting off to witness the test. Sean McDowell ran a gnarled hand through his hair, ignoring the blurring movement. He took a deep breath, slowly letting it out, suddenly feeling weary, and sat down on the grass, nerves strung taut, shaky, exhausted, his eyes glazed. For a moment, the old Shawnee sat dumbfounded, wondering what on earth he was doing sitting on top of Knockadoon at twilight. Images of his Katie washed before his eyes with the realization that his soul was not his own. He'd sold it so long ago for... "Ah, what does it matter, old man? What for?" he snarled, energy recharged. Sean McDowell's weary mind surrendered to the dark power once again. The memory of Katie's vanishing. Leaning on one arm, he heaved himself up, eyes setting on the hag, her hands still busy and with attention still on her knitting. She would pay for her audacity. With effort, he took a heavy step, and then another, and another. He was headed for the Grange. He was needed at the Grange. Okay, I'm going to pause there for a moment because I need to wet me whistle. That growling voice of Sean McDowell just really does my throat. And I have one more chapter I'm going to read today. I drink Voss water, by the way. I know it's from Norway, and I know it's melted glacier, but it's really the best tasting water I've ever had in my life. All right. So now for the last chapter for today. Chapter, let's see, it starts on 293. The Dark Powers. One by one, the pilgrims stepped from the bus and clustered in a silent group nearby, awaiting further instruction. Steve stared, open-mouthed, at the expansive, accurately placed ring of contiguous orthostats circling below the earthen bank on which they stood. Each gray granite stone, more the size of boulders, were set in sockets in the old ground surface, their bases packed about with smaller rocks. Many were covered in lichen or had white splotches on them. Some were pointed or flat-topped. Each stone was an average of 3 to 4 feet in height and the same in girth, except for a huge square-shaped stone that easily stood 8 feet high, rising from the grass on the far side of the circle. This was the Rannoch Crom Duv. At its base, white-flowered, stinging nettle bushes clustered. To the left of it sat the oldest stone in the circle. 2 square stones, about 1 foot in height and girth, stacked one on top of another. They gave the illusion of being steps. The actual entrance to the circle was to the east of the large stone, a slab-faced, cobbled passage through the bank, giving access to the enclosure between it and another large orthostat. The land inside the circle was covered with ryegrass, the occasional stalk of white yarrow, brown-crusted dock, clusters of bright yellow cowslip, and long hairy stalks of the bluish mauve, flat, cushiony filled scabious. Oak trees clustered around the outside bank of most of the circle, intermixed with an occasional elm tree. It was an impressive sight to behold. Inside the bus, Kian grabbed Vivian by the arm, forcing her to face him. "What are we doing here?" His eyes pried into hers, searching for a hint of understanding, begging for clarity, for her to come to her senses. Vivian grinned. "Hey, we'll just stop for a moment. Let them see it, get their fill, and then we'll be off." She raised an eyebrow. "I've not got a good feeling about this," he warned, letting her arm go. He turned and grabbed the hazel staff, held it firmly in one hand, clutching it for instant security before stepping in front of her to exit the bus. Vivian watched his back, how the material of his black t-shirt fell in lines down it. Joe still sat in the driver's seat, facing forward. "Well," he said, grinning, "I'll just wait here in the bus if you don't mind. I don't trust this and would rather not leave me bus alone." With pursed lips, Vivian gave a nod. She smoothed the front of her blouse with both hands. Joe leaned on the driving wheel and peered off toward the setting sun. He felt that at some point Vivian was going to come back to him on this one, expect him to explain his actions, although the excuse he'd given her had been a good one, or so he thought. Maybe she'd go for this. Leprechauns have no place in stone circles. Most of them dwell near the trees, especially at the base of the trunk or inside the hollow hills. And most of them have trades, such as shoemaker, or shoe repairman, or jewelry salesman. All right, probably not, although it was worth a try. He cocked his head to one side, smiling to himself. Would a leprechaun ever be a bus driver? Rarely, he thought. A breeze ruffled through the boughs of an old oak standing on the far side of the street. Hey, maybe the brethren of the local Lep council were gathering underneath that oak right now, and were standing there peering at him with great curiosity and awe. Joe giggled and slapped his thigh. He figured a couple of them would be disgusted and dismayed at a leprechaun gone bus driver, probably believing that such a brother had somehow betrayed them. This may not have been the energy or the reason that had stayed him, though neither Joe nor the others would ever know if it were. The sight affected him, and he found himself sighing and slouched back in his seat, resigning himself to another wait. He turned his head and watched Vivian move down the steps of the bus. An edge of evening sunlight separated the horizon of the western land from the sky, reflecting a golden glow on the circle. As if it had been aligned for this particular sunset, a ray of evening light seemed to slice between two of the western stones, coming to a rest on the grass in the center of the circle. The illusion of safety hovered above the site, luring the pilgrims to it. The distant call of a coot lifted their attention to the rise of Nakadun in the distance before turning to face Vivian as she joined them. All eyes watched her expectantly. Carla coughed and rubbed her belly. Steve wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Ken edged closer to Vivian. Ellen sighed. Rose pulled up on the waistband of the black leggings she wore. Shelby wanted to cry. Marcilla fiddled with the end of her braid. Kat licked her lips. Mark smiled. Donna shifted her weight off her bad leg, and Kian fingered the end of his goatee. Tears filled Vivian's eyes. She glanced away from the familiar faces. This was one of those moments. A moment based on a personal experience that, although it would happen in a short period of time, say 15 or 20 minutes, would become so deeply etched in memory, so deeply etched inside her, that she believed it would somehow become imprinted in her DNA. Experiences such as the one Vivian knew she was about to have would carry her through a lifetime and would, perhaps, be a catalyst for remembering the fullness of the past life that seemed to be gnawing away at her brain like a maggot. Good or evil, beneficial or destructive, joyful or torturous, life or death. She took a slow, steady breath, preparing herself for it. The setting sun was tricking her, them all, with a false sense of peaceful golden glow to the finish of an otherwise dark day. Vivian jerked her eyes away from the horizon, looking to Kian's worried face. He raised his eyebrows in a silent request. "What are we doing here?" She heard his words, the same ones he had spoken inside the bus. How could Vivian explain what she didn't know how to explain? Only that she understood they all had to enter that circle, that she had to expose them all to whatever it was that was attaching itself to them. How could she tell him that she was willing to take full responsibility for opening everyone up to a DNA imprint, good or bad? Vivian glanced at the innocent faces, unknowing faces, then looked beyond to the glowing circle, the golden hue that the setting sun gave them. This false sense of security was needed in order for her to go through with it, because to Vivian it represented the other world, which meant that the other world was sparkling, twinkling around the parameter of the stones that maybe the fairy had gathered. Faery-Chronicle entry 2.555.2. Vivian was correct in her fantasy that, though that's all she believed, it was a fantasy, a mind game she constantly engaged herself in, borderline insanity. But the hosts had gathered to witness the battle, and our presence had indeed added to the golden hue, the magic of the environment, the qualities that hinted at security, peace. These illusions were germane, for they were the bait needed to make Vivian feel secure enough to enter the circle, which for an instant made her conspiracy theory seem all the more ludicrous. Vivian stepped around the quiet group. She walked down the bank, following the path of the sunray, and passed between the two western orthostats into the interior of the circle. Like a sunray, she slipped between the two standing stones, continuing until she came to a stop and stood in the very center of its terrain, enveloped in the golden glow and the sparkling twinkles of the other world. There was no formality demonstrated here, no possession led with the ball run, and no rattles, no circumambulation of the Neolithic religious structure, no entrance through the proper opening located near the Renathcrom Dove stone on the eastern curve of the circle. Vivian had simply walked straight into it and stood there shuffling on her feet, uncommonly dressed in Levi jeans, as if a more masculine outfit had been needed for the task at hand. The others mutely followed Vivian's lead and moved single file behind her into the center, all except Shelby, who stood on the bank looking after the others, wringing her hands, the sound of buzzing filling her ears, growing louder as Vivian turned and faced the group and began speaking. "I will not fear. I will not fear," Shelby chanted softly to herself, eyes filling with tears. Turning to her right, she began making her way around the outside of the circle, taking careful steps on the earthen bank, eyes focused on the grass before her. Kian leaned on his hazel staff, watching Vivian and mentally reciting an old prayer. "Grant, O God, thy protection, and in protection strength, and in strength understanding, and in understanding knowledge, and in knowledge the knowledge of justice, and in the knowledge of justice the love of it, and in that love the love of all existences, and in the love of all existences the love of God, God and all goodness." It was a habit, really, to say the Druid's prayer whenever he felt uncomfortable with the situation, which was the case now. Kian didn't like the energy he felt one bit, and he certainly didn't like Vivian's behavior one bit either. Keeping his eyes on her, he shifted his attention inward, focusing on his breathing pattern, adjusting it so that it was slower, steady. This cycle of breath caused Kian's focus to lower to the surface of the grass, to the vision of layers of soil and granite and all the other matter that made up the earth's crust. He imagined that he was falling through the mantle into the core, where he visualized the den of the dragons, silently beckoning the four coils of Tiamat to rise to the surface, to spiral around him, to imbue him with power. A movement caused Kian to glance up to the earthen bank. Shelby was halfway around it, nearing the formal entry passage. Behind her, someone stood beneath an elm. Kian squinted, barely making out an image of Sean McDowell in the shadows. Haggard face, rounded shoulder, and gaping mouth, looking horribly out of place. Kian passed a hand across his eyes, aware that the others in the group had shifted their attention to a large ash tree Vivian was pointing to, their backs suddenly to Kian. Sean McDowell grinned, a nefarious cast to his wrinkled face. Kian rushed towards Shelby, looking from her back to the old man, whose lips seemed to be moving. Kian reached over the stones and tried to grab Shelby's leg. "Shelby!" called Kian, just brushing the material of her pant leg. "Shelby!" He tried again, but got no response. "Shelby!" Kian demanded a third time, successfully poking her leg with the end of his hazel staff. Shelby stopped and jerked her head toward Kian, her arms flaying to balance herself as she faltered. "You're going widdershins," Kian said. "Go the other way." "What?" Shelby asked. "The other way," he instructed, using the staff as a pointer. "Go the other way. Go Diacel. Instead of widdershins, you're conjuring the wrong energy." Baffled, but obedient, Shelby made an about-face on the bank, and without another word resumed her walk, retracing the steps she'd made. Kian stepped back from the stones, searching the shadows for the old man, but Sean McDowell was nowhere to be seen. Slowly he turned and faced the interior of the circle where the group stood, still, in the middle, just then turning toward the Renachrome Dove. Kian knew what Vivian was doing, explaining the layout of the circle, the guardian trees, the altar stone, the assumed history or prehistory of the site, giving them the background information she thought would appease them. Nigel and Isabel flashed through Kian's mind, blood and dead carcasses, and he realized that the stone circle looked like a huge open mouth, teeth gnashing for more blood. A shudder passed through Kian. For one moment he thought he heard the sound of buzzing. Vivian moved behind Marcella and placed her hand over the woman's shoulder to lay it over the protection amulet hanging around her neck. Kian knew nothing could protect them, not even this concerted act Vivian was attempting. He checked Shelby and headed for Vivian. If anything happened to Vivian, he'd never forgive himself. Vivian glanced up at him as he stopped before her and bit close. Shelby was moving widdershins. I made her turn and go DSL, he whispered. Confusion showed in Vivian's eyes. Kian pointed to Shelby. She was going widdershins, conjuring negative energy. I made her go the other way. Kian searched Vivian's eyes for understanding. Good, was the only response he got before Vivian added, listen up, everyone. The pilgrims all turned and focused on Vivian. The pilgrims drew around her. No one has the protection bag on except Marcella, said Vivian. I'm going to weave a web of protection around us, so focus with me, okay? Heads nodded. Vivian looked back to Kian with frightened green eyes. In response, Kian laid his hand on Vivian's shoulder and gently squeezed. Earth and sea, of ill we will be free, as fire and air draw to us all that is fair, came Vivian's sing-song voice. Kian closed his eyes. Tiamat! He mentally shouted. Spiraling around us, the protection is bound, Vivian continued. We dwell in the center of peace. Kian was unaware that he gritted his teeth as he made his demand a second time. Tiamat, you are summoned to bring forth your dragon power now! Willing it so, protection of fourfold, the spell must hold. Vivian ended the chant. Silence permeated the place. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, taking the golden effluence with it, leaving the circle in shadow, a place of twilight and encroaching darkness. With the absence of light, Legion's power gained momentum. Its sticky fingers circled the stones. No outside aid would help Vivian. Only the powers of darkness could respond. Her words and intent hit up against it and stuck there like a dull ache irritating the dark power. Sean McDowell stood behind the Renath Cromdove stone, biting back his desire to screech. Let her believe she was protected, her and her group. No harm in that. But he froze when he felt the intruding energy rising from the center of the circle and hissed as a rippling vibration forced him to take a step back. Concentric circles of flashing red light shot up through the sight. The howlers went into a frenzy, surfacing from the earth, moving into the stones, preparing to battle the intruding dragon power. Vivian gasped as she saw the first face appear, its red, beady eyes flaring, angry eyes that drew her focus to its open, fanged mouth. She shuddered and turned away, only to focus on another one, and yet another. Each stone was imprinted with a hideous face. Kind of reminds you of an open mouth, doesn't it? Came Kian's voice. Vivian whipped around. What did you say? She asked, baffled and crudely upset with the truth that his words conveyed. Her frantic eyes skipped from one stone to the next, horrified that each stone was now alive. Kian felt a snapping twang inside his head, automatically lifting his hand to the spot. He closed his eyes and shook his head. An open mouth, he offered, attempting to regain his focus. The stones are alive, Vivian mumbled, reaching out to take his arms. Alive, look at them. She turned toward him, toward the stones. Look at them, she insisted a second time, but then was distracted by Shelby. This circle's bad, Vivian hissed, dropping her hand and turning to face Shelby, who was still moving very slowly around the bank, heading south toward two stones placed at such an angle they created a V shape between them, a spot known as the bullhorns. The heads of 5 black and white calves crested the earthen bank as the animals clambered up the lip and lined up single file behind Shelby. They followed her nose to tail toward the bullhorns. Cian's eyes grew hazy as a buzzing filled his ears. He looked upon the shadowy images of the dark droid. Okay, everyone, he heard himself say, move to a stone. Connect with it. Vivian heard Cian's instruction, but ignored the impulse to question him, ignored the intense desire to shout, no, what are you, crazy? She couldn't take her eyes from Shelby as she moved slowly around the bank, leading the calves to the bullhorns. God, this bothered her, immensely bothered her. Something was wrong with that picture. The bullhorns, what had she once read about them? Vivian searched her mind, struggling for the notes and gasping as it fell into place. She's leading them to slaughter, Vivian whispered, her voice refuting a demand to scream. Suddenly it felt as if someone tugged at her head, turned her attention to the northeast, to the Renacrom Dovestone. A rage of energy shot through Vivian as Steve moved up to the stone and placed both hands on it. Shrieking filled the air. The howlers opened their mouths, red eyes glaring, nostrils flaring. They spit venom into the circle, and as if each pilgrim's flesh connected with the surface of a stone, each fell into a stupor. Time split, slowing into sluggish movements, blurry and uncomprehending. Sporadically spaced around the circle, the pilgrims now clung to the stones in surrender. Shelby had almost reached the bullhorns. Cian stood rigidly in the center, eyes blankly staring forward. Vivian filled with panic as she felt her own senses blurring and whirled around. Sean McDowell stood at the base of an elm, staring at her with a hideous grin on his face. His words came easily to her across the distance, as if he stood next to her and spoke confidently to her. You said you would call me? Simple words. Words that exemplified her lie to him the night before. Didn't I tell you then, he said, that I could be of more service to you at the loch now, Vivian? Didn't I say those very words to you last evening? Sean McDowell cocked his head to one side, fingering his chin, waiting impatiently for her response. He waved a hand at the circle. And now look what you've gone and done, he hissed. Her eyes leapt around the circle, coming quickly back to his image. But he no longer stood under the elm. Now he was on the earthen bank. Vivian's mouth fell open. Sure, I could have helped you, he toyed with her, but oh no, you had to be like all the rest, a wicked little witch, wanting all the power for herself. He tissed, shaking his head. But Vivian stammered. He tissed her response away. Now be a good girl and just let me do the work here. I'm the power, not you. But I'll share some of it with you. He smiled, showing yellow teeth. Vivian took an involuntary step back, gasping, as Cian, whose eyes stared off into space, whose back was to the sorcerer. She jerked back, horrified that he now stood inside the stones, only 20 feet away from her. Which one shall it be, my dear Vivian? He asked, leaning slightly forward. Your stupid man at the Crom Duv over there? Steve stood with his back to the stone, a silly smile on his face. Or your tainted man there? Vivian followed his gesture. Kin? She asked, clasping both hands and bringing them to her chest. Kin? He mimicked her, snickering. Legions touch that one, he laughed. He's what got you back here for me. He looked at Kin, licking his lips. I'll give him a thank you regardless, he mumbled, then focused his rheumatic eyes back on her. Or what about your foolish druid, who's gone and evoked the dragon power? He growled, stepping forward, moving only a yard from her. No! Vivian stiffened and shook her head, eyes wide with fear, turning to face Kin as he moved next to her, eyes on the sorcerer. Well, it seems someone has chosen for you, the gruff voice of Sean McDowell whipped her around. It will be nice to have some money for a change, he added, bursting into sardonic laughter. He raised his arms into the air and threw back his head. Dorcon Asifrin! Sean McDowell's words flew around Vivian. Tugumthu Leon mi Ildrakbon! A ferocious wind whipped through the stone circle, lifting hair and clothing. An acrid and foul-smelling things soured the air with their stints. The sorcerer lifted his head and focused on Steve. He pointed a long, bony finger at him. Vivian suddenly doubled over as she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Her breathing became labored as she struggled to quell the nausea, threatened to push the food out of her stomach. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. She bent over, staring at the grass and her own feet, wiping the saliva away from her mouth with her hand, swallowing back the need to spew. She was in disbelief. Using her knees as props, she placed both hands on them and arched her back, raising her head slowly and fearful of what she might now see. Steve stepped away from the stone and was halfway across the space to her. A tribe of ravens littered the sky above him with their black bodies, their cries portending doom. His jeans were stained at the knees, as if he'd been on them, and his normally stiff blonde hair was disheveled. On his face he still wore the silly grin, his eyes glazed and unseen, although focused on Vivian, as if awaiting her next instruction. Well, 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 the buzzing erupted. To be continued. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's Fairy with Teeth narration. I want to say thank you to those of you who joined and listened today. And I hope enjoyed my story. I want to walk you to the exit as I say bye to you. And yeah, until next time, I hope you have a great week. See you soon. Bye.